Hello. Why do people do bad things? I have been asked that many times in my life, and I'm trying to think through the answers. Like, well, people are stupid. People are selfish. People repeat patterns that were taught to them. So hurt people. Did I say that we're idiots? Like all sorts of things. But this question caught me off guard because I didn't think it was happening at this point in the relationship. We were driving in the car, and it was something we would do every day when I would take my oldest daughter to preschool. And I could just see her always in the back seat. And our routine would be different from day to day, but often it would just be playing like some favorite songs. And I was one of those dads who wanted her to grow up cooler than I did. So like I would share like real music, not like little cheesy kids music. So I introduced her to like good bands like Coldplay and stuff like in my day. You may think that's old people's music, but that's your problem, not mine. But like that would be our rhythm, or sometimes we would just be talking about there. Sometimes we'd be really quiet. So like when your parent's an introvert, sometimes quiet's just kind of part of the norm. But this day was especially quiet. And I remember looking in the rearview mirror and just seeing her little face, and it was very pensive and like inquisitive and internal, and she's kind of looking out the window, and then she just asked the question, "Daddy, why do people do bad things?" 5 years old. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to drop like the heavy philosophical answers on a 5-year-old. And so I just asked her a question. Have you ever done anything bad? And I knew she had that day. She had knocked her little sister down fighting for a toy or something, right? And and I knew it was malicious because I saw the intent in her eyes when it happened. And her answer was brilliant. I don't know. I mean, isn't that the truth sometimes? When we're wrestling with like what's going on in life and what's going on in the world, because the question under that question is like, where did all this evil come from? Like, where did all the evil in the world that we're wrestling with, that we're struggling with, that we cry foul about, and yet we cause in our own journey, like, where does it come from? And so I know we're in this series called Deconstruction, looking at some challenging topics along the way. And so tonight we thought, how appropriate on Mother's Day, let's talk about the problem of evil. So does that sound like an appropriate thing on Mother's Day? Yeah, I don't know, like some of you, this might have been an experience of a female paternal figure that you had in your life. Do we have the picture? Yes, like that might be for you. Who is that, by the way, do you know? Yeah. Yeah, Aunt Petunia, yeah, yes. So also, how many of you grew up watching like old school Disney movies? Yeah. So you know Walt had a problem with women. Because can you think of one woman who wasn't the villain, like in the paternal category? Like it's always the wicked stepmom, right? Like there's something there, right? So like, that's just for fun. We're talking about evil on Mother's Day. So if you go home tonight and you're like, "Hey, Mom, we talked about you," you could tell her, "Don't say that. I'm just kidding." But like when we're talking about wrestling with evil, I want to walk through this in a couple of ways, because there's the intellectual discussion about it, right? Like, hey, let's just talk about this, but let's just be honest, like, it's personal too, right? Like when you've experienced evil or evil has hit you, it's just like at some level you're like, no, this isn't fun. But if we're gonna take the issue seriously, then we gotta really be willing to wrestle with it both intellectually and emotionally. And so we're gonna kind of break the conversation down in the categories of what I would just kind of call the philosophical problem proper, and then the personal problem that we might have with evil. And so kind of how you're wired as we're walking through the philosophical side, I just want to let you know, it's okay if you don't like how cold it feels to talk about something like this, because we're gonna talk about the personal side of it as well. But this is often how like the philosophical problem of evil is posed in somebody who's raising the issue of evil to say, therefore, God doesn't exist. And so here's kind of like what they say, the problem of evil proper would be like this, that God is all powerful, God is all good, yet evil exists. How does that make sense? Like, how do we like make sense of these things? Because it would seem like if God is all powerful and God is all good, evil wouldn't exist. But if there's this thing called evil, then something must be wrong. And so like if you're really like trying to break it down, you could look at each of those premises and say, hey, something's there. Typically, this is like the atheist's greatest argument against God's existence. And so they would say, therefore, God doesn't exist. because of this kind of formula or this equation. But there are some other possibilities when you look at this. So it could be that the first premise isn't true. God isn't all powerful. He's just trying his best, people, and it's gotten out of hand. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that God actually isn't good. That's more terrifying than God not existing. That there is a God and his name is Thanos or something like that, right? Like that would be way more creepy. There's a fourth possibility. Evil doesn't exist, right? It's just an illusion. It's the sound of one hand clapping. But that's usually not what people will think if they're bringing the issue up, right? And so then most of the time when somebody is bringing this issue up, their primary therefore is, see, God doesn't exist. Because if God was all good and all powerful, he would do something about it. And so that's kind of the issue of what's going on here. And yet here's a really interesting conundrum about the problem of evil. If you don't know what conundrum is, this is what I always tell my daughters, dictionary.com, or now it's like ChatGPT. It'll give you the answers. But here's the problem of evil actually suffers from a self-refuting problem. And here's the issue. If God doesn't exist, what do we mean by evil? Because if all we live in is a naturalistic world, meaning that all that exists is just natural stuff, like we're just animals and we're just smarter than all the other animals, but this whole thing was just an accident, a big bang or whatever that caused it, what do we mean when we say evil? Right? So when you're watching like a nature show or something and you see like the lions out there and you see like the alpha lion getting older and a younger lion comes in and kills the alpha lion and then kills all the cubs so that lion can take over the pride. Do you ever call 911 when you see that? No, right? Because you're like, oh, that's nature. But if you saw another person walk up and kill another person and then kill their family and take all their stuff, you're like, oh, cool, another nature show. Right? No, like there's something in you like, no, there's something wrong about that, right? Like there's something in us as people that is like, hey, no, like this evil thing is real. Otherwise, what are we crying foul about? And yet if there is no God, what do we even mean if we say that there's this thing called evil? Because all it is like, no, we're just natural creatures walking around doing it. And it might be like convention of society, but it's not really wrong. You know, like the Nazis weren't really wrong. They just weren't strong enough to get away with it. But at one level, you're like, that doesn't sit right. Like something in here goes, no, I don't like that, right? So there's something about that. And so if we're going to chase after this, like we just got to stop and ask the question, what do we mean by evil? Like, let's see if we can understand or define the term. And so I just want to give you what I would maybe call just a common sense definition of evil. And it's not complicated. Evil is that which is not good. And I'm framing it with a negative because have you ever tried to come up with a positive definition of evil? It's a weird endeavor. Like you'd say evil is bad, evil is wrong, but you're still using words that are the opposite of positive words, right? And so we'll come back to that in a minute, but the reason it's hard to give a positive definition of evil is because of it's contrasting to that which is not good. But here's the interesting thing about raising the whole question of what evil is. The irony of evil is that it raises your innate sense of oughtness, your innate sense of right and wrong. So we can get a little personal with this question. Can you remember in your life the first time you actually experienced evil? It was probably like very personal, and it could be very deeply personal because it might have been someone close to you. Oftentimes it's something you experienced probably when you got to school and you encountered other humans that were messed up and they bullied you or whatever. But like I think all of us, if we really were to like sit down on the therapist couch and go back, we could say, that's the first time in my young life I remember experiencing this thing called evil. And what's interesting about that is like, how did you know that was wrong? Now, let's ask an even more personal question. Can you remember the first time you did evil? Like, anyone? Who has never committed anything evil here? Yeah, like we're all like, but here's the thing, how did you know it was wrong when you did it? Like, wasn't there something in you that was like, I gotta hide this, I gotta hope they don't find out, like, if they know that I took it, right? Like, there's something, right? So there's a weird thing whenever evil surfaces, it reveals this innate sense of oughtness or right and wrong in each one of us. And so even though evil may be hard to define, man, you know it when you experience it. right? Because like evil has weight to it. It's a powerful thing. When you encounter evil, it has an impact in your life. You know it right away. Evil is very pervasive. Like you look anywhere, you're gonna find it. It seems like everywhere you go, there it is. Like you look throughout human history, there is no such thing as a utopian where the human race figured it out and it didn't like go bad or go wrong. So 100 years ago, if you go back in time, do you know what was happening in Western history around this time 100 years ago? How many of you like have a good sense of history? The Great War. And you know why we call the Great War World War I? Because for them, it was just the Great War. And then a generation later, it happened again. And they were like, oh, it happened again, let's call it World War II. And so we retroactively went back and called it World War I. Do you know how many people were killed by humans in those two wars? Like, it's mind-boggling, the numbers. But you know what's even crazier? You go back just before the start of the Great War into the early 1900s, and all the writers of that time, the Orson Welles and the people that were popular writers that had given up on God and religion and were finally set free, and it's the Industrial Revolution, they were saying it's the dawn of utopia. We have arrived as a human race. We now have the technology and the tools to make things better. And then within a decade, the world was killing everyone. Like, isn't that crazy? And like, here we are, like you look at like culture now and culture's like, no, it's so great. We're so advanced. It's going to be perfect. We're going to like social engineering. It's like, study our race. Like evil is pervasive. It's everywhere. And it's just a matter of time until the utopia we're building today blows up because we're the ones building it, right? But it's not simply that. Evil is personal. Like, man, it marks us. When you experience evil, like you're never the same. But it also marks you when you do evil, right? Like, so there's just something very pervasive about it. And yet, as we begin to understand the definition of evil, that which is not good, it kind of begs the question then, like, well, are good and evil like these two opposite forces trying to to figure it out? So like, I'm a nerd and I grew up watching Star Wars, like the original trilogy, the only real trilogy that was ever created. Everything else is evil now that's been made, but like I grew up watching that, and that's the whole, like the balance of the force, right? The good and the dark, all that stuff. But that's built on a framework that there are two equal forces that need to figure out the difference between them. But the reality is that good and evil are not equal. Good is a greater reality than evil, not simply by preference, but just in the context of what it is. So here's what I mean by that. Good can exist without evil. But evil cannot exist without good. So I'm going to give you like an illustration to think this through. So think of an apple. So if you were here at church like 6 weeks ago, I kind of used this illustration, but think of an apple right now and just imagine like a really beautiful, good apple. It's a hot day. This is a cold, crisp apple. You're going to take a bite. It's refreshing. And you look at it and you say, hey, this is a good apple. Now imagine that apple rotten, decaying, and you're looking at it like that's no longer good, right? Can the rottenness exist without the apple? No, but can the apple exist without the rottenness? That's what evil is. Evil is like a parasite. Evil is like the rottenness. So evil cannot exist unless it's depriving something good, which is why when God created the world, he said it is, what do you say every day? It is good, right? Which is going to ask another question in a little bit. But like, so when we're looking at this, we begin to realize, okay, so evil is a real thing. We can experience it. It may be hard to define, but man, it's not the greatest thing. Because we can all envision a world without evil, but that world needs some help if it's going to get there. And the reality is like evil all by itself just doesn't exist. It needs something to deprive. So it's a dependent or a contingent idea. And again, as we're just trying to say, okay, what is evil? We can put evil into what I would just call two meta categories. And so the first category is what we could just call moral evil. And moral evil is evil that is brought about by the actions of other people, right? So do you know the world of difference between someone tripping you by accident and someone tripping you because they wanted to knock you to the ground? Like how many of you have been tripped by somebody? And are you mad in the moment? And then you look and they're like, I'm so sorry, that was an accident. And you believe that that was the truth. Do you just like, okay, like just stop being clumsy, right? But if you look, somebody tripped you and then they're standing over you and they're just like pointing the finger, that's a different experience, right? Like, and depending on how alpha you are, or the lion in you, like we sang about in the song, right? You're like, come at me, bro, right? Like there's something in you that reacts to that. But like that would be moral evil. Someone tripping you because they're an idiot, or just by accident, that's not evil. That was just an accident. But someone tripping you because they wanted to harm you, that would be an example of moral evil, right? So that's the first meta category. Here would be the second meta category. We would just call it natural evil. And so natural evil is evil that is a result of nature going off the rails in some way and causing human suffering to one degree or another. Now, natural evil is interesting when we talk about it because have you ever seen like the coastal cliffs decaying? Like you've been out to Malibu or whatever. Like my wife and I were at Malibu yesterday walking around. We saw some serious retrograde construction because like that house is going to be gone in a few good storms, right? And they're like doing everything they can to like save their house in this moment, right? But have you ever just kind of like seen the slides or someone's filming on Instagram and you see the thing crumble and you're like, that's crazy. But we don't necessarily call that evil until there was somebody sunbathing underneath the coastal cliff and then it collapsed on them. And then we're like, ooh, that feels like, why did that happen to them? So natural evil is an interesting category because we see the world doing all sorts of broken things, but we don't necessarily call it evil unless it directly impacts or hurts somebody or you or someone else, right? But it's interesting. So here's what I want to do now is take this thing of evil that we've been talking about in these categories and just ask a very important question, which all kids who are really good thinkers ask. Where did evil come from? Because like, if the Christian story is true, that God is the creator of everything, then it creates an interesting, uncomfortable question, right? Did God create evil? And if God created evil, how could he be good? Like, have you ever wrestled with that? Like, am I the only one who stays up late at night and sometimes being like, I don't know where to go with this one. How do we walk this out? How do we wrestle with this? And so let's chase that question with both of these categories of evil. Like God, like, did you cause this or create this? Like, what is this? And so let's ask this about the first category. Did God create moral evil? And so here's how I think we could look at this. That moral evil is the result of God creating freedom in creatures who have a will or a sense of agency. Does that make sense? So do me a favor, raise your right hand right now. Let me just see. Okay, who raised your hand right now? Who did that? Yeah, you're raising your hand again to answer the question. That's brilliant, yeah. Like you did it, right? Like I asked the question, but somebody could say, well, did Joel cause that? Well, I think indirectly by asking the question, but who chose to do it? You did, right? And so here's what's really interesting about this, that God is technically the cause of the fact of human freedom. But we are the cause of the acts of our freedom. So who's to blame? How many of you have blamed God for something in your life or your story? Let's just get real honest, right? And the question is like, well, did God do that? Or did someone else do that? Or let's get real honest, were you just stupid and you did it? Like the Proverbs that says, a person's own folly ruins their life, yet their heart rages against the Lord. Like I've met with people that have just done really stupid things. Like, why would God let this happen to me? And it's like, no, you dummy. You did it, right? That sort of a thing. And yet, so here's that kind of the conundrum for us as we're wrestling with evil and who's responsible and where does it come from. To create people capable of moral good is to create people capable of moral evil. See how that works? Like God can make us free, but he cannot make us do only moral good. Because then we are no longer what? Free. Like, is a puppet really free? If God's just up there pulling the strings, like, do we have any real freedom in that scenario? Like, no. Look at what C.S. Lewis writes about this in Mere Christianity. So one of my favorite Christian thinkers from a generation or 2 generations ago, if you're ever looking for just a good read, I dare you to buy this book and try to read it. It's so good. But he says this, he goes, some people think They can imagine a creature which was free but had no possibility of going wrong. I cannot. If a thing is free to be good, it is also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give them free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A world of automata, that'd be like robots, of creatures that work like machines would hardly be worth creating. The happiness that God designs for his higher creatures is the happiness of being freely, voluntarily united to him and to each other in an ecstasy of love and delight, compared to which the most rapturous love between a man and a woman on this earth is mere milk and water. And for that, they must be free. So why did God create us? Like if this is correct, like we have freedom, why would God create us knowing that we would make this terrible choice? Have you ever just wondered that? Why? Why did you do this? Why did you make us? And I think the answer is because God knew how awesome he was, and he wanted to share himself with other beings. But prior to God creating anything, all God had was himself. And if the Trinitarian view, so God was in this beautiful relationship, one God, three persons. And God's like, look how awesome this is. We got to share this. And so he created other beings, but beings who would be able to enjoy that had to be free and be able to choose if they wanted to enjoy that or not. And so here's the invitation God creates for every single person on this planet. Do you want me or not? And ultimately, that's what our first parents' choice made. If you look at the garden story in the book of Genesis, right? Like God's like, here's this world I created for you. It's going to be awesome. Here's just don't do the one thing. You do the one thing, it's going to go really bad. They did the one thing, and it gets really bad. The human race looks awesome for 2 chapters. And then the rest of the book is just how messed up we are and how faithful God is to not give up on us. But this is the reason that God created us. And it's really interesting reading like C.S. Lewis, so many years later, because look at go back to that quote for a second, kind of in the middle, where he's like, a world of automata or robots of creatures that work like machines would hardly be worth creating. You know what's crazy? Watching the emergence of AI right now and seeing where people are going to go with machines. You're going to see people choosing a relationship with a machine over another human being in your generation. And it sounds crazy, but it sounds fringe, but it's going to be legitimate soon. Because it's already happening. You can download the app right now and have your best friend or your creepy lover or whatever you want on your phone, because it will do whatever you want and it will tell you whatever you want. But is that a real relationship? No. But that's where some people are going to settle for that instead of holding out for the real thing. And God's like, I don't want that. I don't want AI. I want real humans. So I'm going to create them and create an opportunity for them to have life with me. And when it goes south, I'm going to create a plan for them so they can step back into the reality of what I have. But this is the reason God created us. But to create that reality also created the possibility of it going south. And God's like, but I'm big enough, I'm great enough, I have a plan to restore it should the race want to respond to the promise of rescue that I'm bringing, right? So here's a reason why moral evil exists. God created free creatures. Free creatures made stupid choices, right? That's just how it is. Now, we could step to the next category. Well, then did God create natural evil? When we look at the world that's in trouble or falling, and here's something that realizes that natural evil results from living in a fallen creation. So here's a question. How did that happen? How did the world break? Who did it? That's a rhetorical question, but if you want to answer out loud, you can. Who's responsible? Again, we look at the opening story. It seems like when our first parents disobeyed God, they messed some stuff up, not themselves, right? And so now here we are living in the consequence of that. We're living in a fallen world, and yet God's plan is that it could be restored. Paul writes this about the creation suffering because of the choices. In Romans 8:18 through 21, he says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. So he's talking about the things that we're struggling with compared to what God's going to do in our story in the long run. That day will far outweigh the pain of this day. But then look what he says, that the creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. Right? So like God's intention and God's plan for this broken world is that it will be restored one day, but the world is broken, so it's hurting. And in the brokenness, that's where we're going to see things that don't work the way they're supposed to. And there's going to be fallenness. We live in a fallen world. That's where you're going to see dark things emerge, like sin and disease. That wasn't a part of the original design. That's not a part of the 2.0 version someday. But it's a part of reality today because of the world that got broken. And so as we think about this idea of natural evil, like at one level, it's like, hey, it's a fallen world. But some of the natural evil in this world is still because of the choices that we make. So if you want to go on a deep conspiracy dive, look up Rocketdyne. Anyone familiar with that? Yeah, it's just kind of over the hill, and it's this thing that existed a generation or two ago and apparently created a lot of toxic waste. And there are tons of people that live on one side of Simi Valley that won't drink the water because they think it's contaminated, it's going to kill them, right? So whether that's true or not, that's the conspiracy theory. But let's just go with it that it's true, that once upon a time there's a generation messing around with stuff that did something horrible, and now it's contaminated the water supply. So people drink the water supply and get sick and die. That's like natural evil that was caused by the choice of someone before them. Does that make sense? So sometimes that's why natural evil exists. I was talking to my mom on the phone today. They live in an old people's home, and she was telling me that yesterday the smoke alarm went off and they all had to be evacuated down the hall because they thought the building was on fire. That's not a good day. Then they find out that the building was on fire because of the dude living on the room on the end who accidentally tipped over his lamp and set his bed on fire. Okay, that's a problem. And then they find out as they dig deeper into the story that he's been talking about wanting to burn the place down because he doesn't want to live anymore. And then they find out as they dig deeper in the story, he got matches from a guest 2 weeks ago. Now, I don't know if that was what happened, right? But if that's the case, one dude makes a choice and a whole building burns down, that's bad. A whole neighborhood could have burned down. And that's evil, but still caused by someone's choice, right? Like it's crazy when you think about some of the evil in this world is still us, even the natural evil. Do you know why there's so much plastic floating in the ocean right now? Because we made a good product and went crazy with it. Because some of the natural evil in this world is a byproduct of good things gone crazy. So I'm old enough to remember that when you went to the grocery store, once upon a time, they used to ask you paper or plastic, meaning what do you want your groceries put into? And in my time, plastic was the more environmentally friendly choice because it meant we weren't cutting down trees anymore and making paper bags because we were destroying the forest by chopping down trees and making all these paper bags that we were just throwing away. So the new invention that was going to save the planet was plastic. Now, what is it? Like you go into the store and ask for plastic bags, you are socially shamed for being a toxic plague on the environment. Where a generation ago, that was what was going to save the planet. Isn't that crazy? Now, here's something to think about. You're going to see this in your generation. All the electric cars, awesome. We're no longer going to burn fossil fuels. We're no longer going to like heat up the planet and kill everything on it, assuming that science is accurate. And now we have Tesla and all the cars. You know what you're going to deal with in your generation and your kids' generation? What do we do with all these batteries? Like you just like eventually they're going to run out and just going to be like, well, just throw them in the dump. And then like your grandchildren are going to be dealing with the problem that this generation's solution was. And you know what the ironic thing is? Like 4 generations from now, hey, fossil fuels. This is a great, like, then we won't have, like, it's just crazy to see, like, today's solution becomes tomorrow's problem. And you're just like, because it's like we're trying, like, but so we're doing stuff. We're supposed to be the caretakers of the planet. And because we don't think it through long-term, we're killing the planet, right? And so some of the natural evil is because of our choices. Sometimes the natural evil that we experience in this world is a God-given warning. And we have to be so careful when we're calling that one out. Like you'll see this in the Old Testament a lot. Like Like the nation goes south, goes off the rails, and God brings in like a serious judgment of some sort. But there's always a prophet of God to tell the people this is what it is. So do not jump on the bandwagon of judging something when you see something bad happen unless God has clearly told you that's what it was, right? Does that make sense? But sometimes like there's bad things that happen because God's like, wake up, and I'm bringing this to wake you up. So this is a fun talk, isn't it? Evil, so fun to talk about. So why doesn't God do something about it? Like, God, if you're good, and if you're so powerful, deal with it. Which raises the question, whose responsibility is it to deal with? Like, who's responsible for the mess? Is it him or is it us? So what are we asking God to do when we're asking him to deal with the mess? God, would you fix what we broke? And in doing so, would you fix us? Because we're the ones responsible for what has happened. And yet here's our hope. If God is good and if God is all powerful, then he can deal with it. And he can bring a workable solution that has the rescue plan all over it for our sake, for the hope of something good. And see, our hope is that God has done something about evil in the most ultimate sense. God has done something about your evil and my evil. He's paid the price for it. That's what the cross is all about. Jesus is like, hey, you're the perpetrator. You're not the victim in the story. And I came to seek and save people like you. And I will take your sin, your penalty, your death upon myself on the cross. And it will die with me so that when I come back to life, you can have the hope of a new life in me. But not only has God already dealt with evil in that sense, there will come a day where God will ultimately deal with evil and it will be no more. And this is the beautiful thing that we see in the book of Revelation. John, writing near the end of the book of Revelation, is he's seeing like kind of the end game of what God wants to do with his creation. And so in Revelation 21, 1-8, John shares what he saw. He says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. See, that's God's end game the whole time. He wants relationship with us. That's why he created us, so he could have a beautiful relationship with us in this world. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. See, God's going to get rid of all the evil. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And yet here's the question we have to ask. What do we do about the evil? Like, what if I don't want what God wants? What if I want to continue living life on my own? What if I want to just continue being a person who pursues life on my terms? What does God do with somebody who won't come under his authority? He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, to the thirsty, so that to those who truly desire what God wants, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, now a whole category of people that don't want what God wants, God still has to deal with the evil in the universe. Otherwise, we're going to keep corrupting it, right? He says, but the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magical arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. So God's going to deal with evil. He's going to deal with the evil of this world, and he's going to deal with our evil. How do you want him to deal with your evil? Do you want the one who paid the price, or do you want to pay that price yourself? Right? Like, we'd have a whole other talk on this doctrine of hell, which is not a fun one to talk about. But man, here's a God who's like, I am so good, I'm going to deal with it. And I'm so good, I'm going to make a way for you so that when I deal with it, I can set you free from it. And that's the beautiful hope that we have in the gospel. And so here's kind of looking through it more from what I would just call the philosophical problem of evil and some theological answers that we see in the scripture. But what do we do as we're wrestling this thing through and we're trying to figure out, but why? Why would God allow evil? Like, God, what purpose could there be? And so here's what I would just say. When we're wrestling with evil, we got to bring some humility to the question. We got to be willing to bring some humility. And here's why. Our knowledge is limited. Do you know that about yourself? Like, how many of you know things now you didn't know 10 years ago? How many know things now you didn't know when you were 5 years old? How many of you think in 30 years from now, you'll know things that you don't know now? How many of you think that maybe in 100 years, you'll know things you don't know now? What about 1,000 years from now? Yeah, like there's a moment where we're gonna step into eternity with God and we'll be like, oh, I always try to envision like what my first words in heaven are gonna be. I think my first word when I step into that moment, whether he returns or he calls me home through death, I think my first word is just gonna be, wow. Like for 1,000 years, wow. Like the angels just singing, holy, holy, holy. Like I just think I'm gonna be caught up in that and just be like, wow, this is you and I was made to experience that. Like, thank you that you just didn't give up on me. Just wow. And then I think my second word is just gonna be like, oh, that's what that was all about. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, that's why that happened? Whoa, you mean she broke my heart because you saved me from somebody that was gonna become a terrible person? Oh, thank you for looking out for me, right? Like, I just think there's gonna be a lot of perspective gained in that moment. And I do think that the third word will be at some point, oh, this is where I chose me over you. This is where I was selfish. This is where I just did things that were still about me and not you. Thank you that you're gonna wipe away every tear from my eye, even the tears of regret. And you're gonna bring me home. But that's just kind of how I envision, well, I'll tell you how it goes when it happens, but that's just kind of there. But we gotta bring some humility when we're wrestling with the problem of evil. Because here's the thing, not understanding why God allows what happens does not mean God does not have good reasons for it. Do you know what why reveals when you ask that? God, why would you let this happen? Do you know what that reveals? All that why reveals is ignorance. It just means I don't know. And God can choose to answer or not in this moment. But when we're asking the question why would God allow that? It doesn't mean that there's not a reason or that God isn't capable or good enough for why that's happening. Timothy Keller, he wrote this amazing book called The Reason for God. I would just recommend it to anyone who's wrestling with like deep questions of your faith. He says this, he goes, with time and perspective, most of us can see good reasons for at least some of the tragedy and pain that occurs in life. Why couldn't it be possible that from God's vantage point, there are good reasons for all of them? If you have a God great and transcendent enough to be mad at because he hasn't stopped evil and suffering in the world, then you have at the same moment a God great and transcendent enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you can't know. Indeed, you can't have it both ways. Like, here's the interesting thing that I think whenever like the atheist who is angry and bringing up the problem of evil, what are you angry about? Because your worldview doesn't have a category for what that is. And with whom are you angry? Is it possible you're actually not an atheist? You're just a pissed off theist? Maybe it's time to wrestle with the God you're angry with and let him meet you in it, right? But here's something to think through. See, when it comes to the objection of evil, the problem proper, the problem of evil, the burden actually lies on the one raising the objection. So the person who's saying, well, how could a God be all powerful and all good and allow evil? They're asking the question, how? You don't have to answer that question. Your response to that question is, well, can you give a clear case for why God doesn't have reasons or can't allow that to happen? It's on them to bring out the answer to their question. That's not on you. They have to say how that can't be possible. But if it's even slightly possible, then the problem begins to fade away. It doesn't mean we don't feel it, but the actual intellectual argument just isn't there anymore. And so here's the thing as we're wrestling through it. But most of the time when we're really asking the question, it's not just like an intellectual conversation, a philosophical question, because when we're wrestling with evil, it's probably because we've been hit by it, right? I mean, how many of you have wounds in your story, your life because of evil, the reality of evil? And so I think when we're wrestling with evil, Yes, let's not be afraid of having a robust conversation, but let's also meet people right where they're at as they're wrestling with it. And so let me just kind of give you a couple of thoughts when encountering evil. First one is this: when encountering evil in another person's story, two things. Love them and hurt with them. Like enter the place where they're in the struggle. One of the shortest verses in all the Bible is also arguably one of the most beautiful. John 11:35. Anyone know it? Jesus wept. You know the context of that verse? Like he shows up to the tomb of Lazarus, his good friend. And we're told in the previous part, like before he gets there, that his sisters have sent word, hey, the one you love, so this is somebody he cares about, is sick. Hurry up and get here so you can heal them. His sisters knew that Jesus could heal him, right? And Jesus intentionally delays so that by the time he gets there, Lazarus will already be dead. And so he shows up, right? And the sisters are upset in different ways. Mary and Martha are upset in their different ways. And then when Jesus gets to the tomb and he sees everyone weeping, his response isn't, hey, I can take care of evil, grow up, gain perspective, I got this. His response was to enter the hurt and the mess and experience it with them. And he wept. Even though he knows in the very next breath, he's gonna say the words, Lazarus, come out. He still was in that space hurting with them, experiencing it with them. So even though we know we have the hope of the end game, like God, someday you'll wipe away these tears. Someday I'll be with you. 1,000 years from now, this will feel like child's play compared to that day. Like, thank you that you still enter into the space with me. You still meet me where I'm at. And as people who hold on to that hope, let's be people that are willing to enter into that space with one another. It's why Paul writes, say, mourn with those who mourn. Right? Like we enter in that space with them. So I would encourage you, if you're walking with a friend who's going through some serious hurt or pain in their story, don't pull out the philosophical thing. Well, let's talk about the categories of evil. Is it possible that what you're experiencing is not natural evil, it's moral evil because of the bad choice of, don't be that guy. Like be the friend that presses in. There's a place for that conversation, right? But don't be that guy in the moment. Like be somebody who's leaning in. But here's the thing now, when it's not just their story, when you're encountering evil in your own story, what do you do? And I would just say, you gotta remember who God is and what he's done. So who's got a Bible open? Open up to Romans for me. Romans chapter 5 and Romans chapter 8. Who's got Romans 5:8? And is willing to read. Sorry, let me give you what I'm asking you to look it up. Romans 5:8. Someone read that out loud, really loud for the room, please. Okay, so Paul says that God demonstrates his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So first question, when did God love you? When you got your act together or when you were at your worst? When you're at your worst, right? And so what's the proof of God's love for you? It's the cross. It's what Jesus did for you. There is nothing that can happen to you that can change the reality of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago. So you might wrestle and wonder and ask, but the question, God, do you love me, has been decisively answered for all time. And so one of the things that we have to remember is, God, I know that you love me. It doesn't feel good right now. I don't understand what's going on, but I'm gonna look to the cross. Because at the cross, that's where I'm gonna plant my flag of faith. This is the proof of your love for me. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm gonna hold on to you and I'm gonna trust that if you are good enough to do that for me, you're good enough to get me through this. And we have to speak that truth into our souls at times and remind ourselves of that. Now somebody read Romans 8:28. Who's got it and is willing to read it? Yeah. Oh, go ahead. All right. Sorry. Your hand was first, but his voice was first. Okay, so Paul says here that we know that in all things God works for the good, for those who love God and are called according to his purpose, right? Notice Paul doesn't say all things are good. What does he say? In all things, God works for the good. And so here's something to pray when you're in the thick of it. God, I can't wait to see what you're gonna make of this. because this is a mess and this hurts and like I'm grieving and there's pain, but you promise that in all things you will work for the good. So I can't wait to see what you're gonna make of this. And that's my hope, and I'm gonna hold on to that. That someday I will see your goodness prevail over today's darkness. And until that day, would you help me to hold on to you and invite him to meet you in that place? And we hold on to these things that we've been told, the things that we've been seeing and that we've shown as we're facing the reality of evil in our own life and our own story. And so I don't know where you're at with your own wrestle with evil today as we're talking through this. Is it more on the intellectual side? I would encourage you, don't shy away from the questions and don't shy away from the wrestle, but press into it. And invite God to show you things through his word and chase after the conversations with people. Like, don't be afraid of that. Like keep your eyes wide open, because faith is not blind. Faith is eyes wide open in the one who gives us confidence for what we believe. But maybe your wrestle is more on that personal side, that there's something in your story that you're trying to make sense of or it's happening today and you're like, God, I just don't get it. I don't understand. Keep your eyes once more on Jesus. Keep your eyes on him, because he's the one who is the proof of God's love for you. And he's the one who said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And so Jesus, I'm keeping my eyes on you even in the midst of the pain, because I know that you will get me through this, and I need you at work in my story. Because he has dealt with evil. He will deal with evil. And in between those two spaces, he is with you and he is for you. And he will lead you through the valley of the shadow of death, because that is who he is. And so I just want to pray for us, and then we're going to go and do this. Are they coming? Yeah, okay, good. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to go into this final song. I just want to invite you to let this song even be a deeper reflection of prayer in light of the things that we've been talking about tonight. And so, Father, there's so many questions I think that we can have as we're wrestling with the reality of evil in this world. God, I know there's been times in my own story where I've even wondered if you're real because of what I was experiencing. And so I'm just so grateful that you're not a God who gives up on us. Even when we mess up, or even when we're doubting and wondering, that you're a God who pursues and holds fast. Jesus, you said that no one would snatch us from your hand because the Father had given us to you. And so I'm thinking that tonight, maybe for some of us, we just need to know that you're holding us close in the season we're in. That you're wrapping your arms around us, that you're carrying us through this dark time, that whatever we're facing, we would know that you are enough and that you are for us. And so would you come and bring that promise of peace that you said you'd give us? I just ask that for anyone here in this place that's like, they're in the thick of it. Would they know that you're greater, and would you whisper into the depths of their soul that you have them in your arms? And for those of us that are maybe here tonight and we're kind of just wondering about the reality of you or our own questions that we might have, would we know that it's okay to ask, it's okay to question, that there's no question you're ever afraid of. But could we approach it with the right kind of humility that says, hey God, I don't know, so I want to lean in and learn. I want to grow. So would you give the wisdom that I need? Would you give the counsel, the friends, the support, whatever it is? Because I got questions. I'm trying to make sense of it. So would you help me land the plane on some things that I'm wrestling with? But wherever you're at tonight, I just want to encourage you in this moment. Enter in. Let this song shape a prayer. Let this song shape what you would desire to be true for you and for God. And so, Lord, we come here grateful for you, that you are for us, that you have chased us, that you have pursued us, and that in you we can have life, we can have joy, we can have peace, we can have hope. And so come in this moment and